In the heart of the Mojave, the desert does not forget. It merely waits for the tools of the future to catch up with the secrets of the past. For decades, the vast expanse surrounding the Las Vegas Valley has been a landscape of unanswered questions, a place where stories were cut short and buried beneath layers of shifting silt and caliche. But as we enter 2026, the silence of the desert is finally being broken. The glitter of the Strip has always provided a convenient mask for what occurs in the shadows. But today, those shadows are being illuminated by a level of scientific precision that was once the stuff of fiction. Before we continue with this chilling story, we would like you to subscribe and tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. It will encourage us to do more and also help the algorithm to suggest our video to more people who like cases like this one. As of early 2026, the landscape of criminal investigation in Nevada has been fundamentally reshaped. We are witnessing the arrival of the 2026 Forensic Initiative. This is not a standard cold case unit. It is a specialized task force composed of genomic experts, digital archaeologists, and investigators who view the passage of time not as a barrier, but as a filter that is finally being cleared. Central to this initiative is the implementation of new skeletal reconstruction software, a platform capable of taking fragmented, weathered remains and generating high-fidelity digital likenesses that account for age, environmental wear, and even the subtle markers of regional nutrition. This initiative arrived at a critical moment. In the early months of 2026, a departmental audit led to the discovery, a long-forgotten evidence locker tucked away in a decommissioned municipal storage facility containing biological samples from the 1990s. These were samples that had been collected during an era when DNA technology was in its infancy. Biological footprints from cases like those of Dana Mackay and Mary Huffman that had been preserved in a state of stasis, waiting for a generation of scientists who knew how to read them. The contents of this locker are more than just old files. They are the physical remnants of a city in transition. Within these containers are the keys to understanding a period of Las Vegas history defined by rapid expansion and the heavy influence of the gaming industry's old guard. These samples represent the bridge between the analog mysteries of 1993 and the digital solutions of 2026. To understand why these updates are so significant, one must understand the stakes. These are not merely new pieces of information added to a news cycle. They represent the final pieces of a decades-long puzzle. For the families of those who vanished in the shadow of the stratosphere or disappeared after a shift at the Tropicana, 2026 is the year where missing becomes found and unsolved becomes adjudicated. The specialized software of the 2026 Forensic Initiative is now processing the Mackay and Huffman files, cross-referencing the newly recovered biological data with global databases that did not exist when these individuals first vanished. We are no longer looking for a needle in a haystack. We are using a magnet to pull the needle through the hay. Every update we reveal today is a direct result of this collision between old-world secrets and new-world science. The desert is giving up its residents, the concrete of the old Strip is yielding its anomalies, and the files that were once considered cold are now radiating with the heat of an active investigation. The stories of the vanished are no longer being written in the sand, they are being encoded in the ledger of justice.
While the desert floor has long been a repository for the city's lost history, the most startling revelations of 2026 have emerged from a location once thought to be an eternal vault. For decades, the massive depths of Lake Mead provided a watery shroud for the remnants of a more turbulent Las Vegas. However, the persistent and historic decline in water levels has acted as a slow-motion excavation, pulling back the curtain on the reservoir's deepest floors. This environmental shift has led to the update on what investigators now call the barrel cases, a series of discoveries that have forced a total rewriting of the city's mid-century underworld history. As the waterline retreated hundreds of feet from its original 1970s boundaries, it exposed several industrial drums that had been resting in the silt for nearly half a century. In the early months of 2026, the Forensic Initiative utilized forensic mapping to treat the newly exposed shoreline not just as a recovery site, but as a time capsule. Using high-resolution aerial photogrammetry and bathymetric data, investigators were able to plot the exact original depth and location where these barrels were deposited. This mapping allowed the task force to determine that the placement was not random. The containers were located in what would have been deep-water channels far from the recreational boat traffic of the era. The precision of the placement suggests a familiarity with the lake's topography that only a few would have possessed in the late 1970s. The mapping also revealed a debris field of period-accurate artifacts, weighted materials, and discarded nautical gear that helped investigators narrow down the specific window of time when these deposits occurred. The most profound breakthrough of this act came when an identity was revealed for a victim first discovered in a barrel near Hemingway Harbor. For years, the remains were known only by a case number, a ghost from 1977 that the technology of the time could not name. However, in 2026, using Advanced Investigative Genetic Genealogy, or IgG, the task force successfully bridged the gap. By extracting high-quality genomic data from the interior of the victim's remains, protected from the elements by the sealed nature of the drum, scientists were able to build a comprehensive profile. They uploaded this data to specialized genealogical databases, eventually identifying second and third cousins who had uploaded their DNA for ancestry research. This led the team back to a specific family tree in the Midwest and ultimately to a name, a former casino employee who had vanished during the transition of power between major gaming syndicates in the summer of 1977. This identification transformed a cold case into a live investigation, providing a name to the silence and a face to the history. This lead immediately brought investigators to the mob connection. Upon a second, more meticulous analysis of the remains and the associated artifacts, the 2026 task force identified specific markers of the 1970s casino syndicates. The attire found with the remains was particularly telling. The victim was clothed in a distinctive high-end leisure suit, common among the upper-tier staff of the old strip resorts. Analysis of a piece of jewelry recovered from the site, a gold ring with a specific weathered engraving, linked the item to a private jeweler who catered almost exclusively to the leadership of a defunct casino syndicate. Forensic textile experts also identified the presence of unique synthetic fibers in the clothing that were only used in the upholstery of specific luxury vehicles favored by high-ranking associates of the time. These artifacts are more than just clothing. They are the forensic signatures of a bygone era. They provide a direct link to the Black Book era of Las Vegas, where disputes were often settled far from the neon lights of the casinos. The artifacts suggest that the victim was not a random target, but someone who occupied a position of trust and perhaps possessed knowledge that the syndicate deemed too dangerous to remain on the surface. The barrel cases are no longer just urban legends used to scare tourists. They are now active crime scenes, bolstered by 2026 technology that can see through the rust and the passage of time. The receding waters of Lake Mead have done more than just reveal the environmental crisis. They have provided a window into the foundation of Las Vegas itself. Each barrel recovered is a chapter of a book that was supposed to stay submerged forever. But as the 2026 Forensic Initiative continues its work, those chapters are being read with a clarity that ensures the truth can no longer be hidden by the tide. The identifying markers, the attire, the artifacts, and the genomic hits have created a trail that leads directly back to the boardroom and the back rooms of the 1970s. For the first time in 50 years, the names of the vanished are being spoken again, and the syndicates that thought they had buried their secrets are finding that the desert and the lake have a way of returning what was lost.
In the mid-1980s, the Old Strip was a place of high-stakes gambling and even higher-stakes entertainment. Among its most radiant fixtures was a high-profile lounge singer whose talent made her a household name in the desert oasis. Then, in 1985, the music stopped. Her disappearance was sudden, absolute, and remained one of the city's most haunting enigmas for 40 years. For decades, investigators searched for a trace of the neon ghost, but the trail was as cold as the marble floors of the casinos she once headlined. That changed in early 2026. The catalyst for this breakthrough was not a digital algorithm, but a human moment, a deathbed confession. A former pit boss, a man who had seen the inner workings of a famous hotel's operations during the peak of the syndicate era, chose his final hours to unburden himself. He provided a detailed account of a night in 1985, describing a sequence of events that the public had never suspected. His testimony pointed investigators away from the desert and toward a specific construction site located directly beneath the foundation of a legendary resort on the Strip. This confession provided the X on the map that the 2026 Forensic Initiative needed. However, the challenge was immense. How do you search for remains buried beneath 40 years of reinforced concrete and active resort operations without tearing down a multi-million-dollar landmark? The answer lay in ground-penetrating radar, GPR. In the spring of 2026, technicians deployed specialized GPR units capable of emitting electromagnetic pulses that penetrate deep into high-density materials. By analyzing the reflected signals, the team could visualize the structures beneath the floor. They weren't looking for clear images, but for anomalies, disruptions in the uniform density of the concrete and the underlying soil that indicated something was buried there. After days of methodical scanning in the hotel's lower levels, the radar identified a distinct pocket of air and organic matter trapped within the foundation, a signature that matched the physical parameters of a hidden burial. With the location confirmed, the task force utilized digital reconstruction to understand the site without immediate excavation. By combining the GPR data with original architectural blueprints from the 1980s, they created a three-dimensional model of the foundation as it existed during the 1985 renovation. This model allowed investigators to see exactly how the site was altered during the window of the singer's disappearance. The digital reconstruction revealed that a utility vault had been filled in with unauthorized concrete shortly after the singer vanished. This was the definitive evidence the department needed. The neon ghost was no longer a myth, she was a physical reality, trapped in the very infrastructure of the city that had made her famous. This discovery has sent a shockwave through the Las Vegas historical community, proving that the city's growth was sometimes literally built upon the lives of those who were deemed disposable by the powers of the time. The deathbed confession of the pit boss didn't just provide a location, it provided a context. He described a world where the lines between entertainment, gaming, and enforcement were blurred. The lounge singer, it appears, had become a witness to a transaction that she was never meant to see. Her disappearance wasn't a random act, but a logistical decision made by those who viewed the concrete of the Strip as the ultimate silencer. As we move through 2026, the recovery process is underway, handled with a level of delicacy that honors the victim while preserving the forensic integrity of the site. The neon ghost is finally coming home, and the secrets buried beneath the Old Strip are being brought into the light of the 21st century.
Beyond the reach of the casino lights, the Mojave Desert holds on to the physical remnants of those who were never meant to be found. For over 30 years, one case in particular stood as a symbol of the city's unidentified lost, the Desert Rose. This was the name given to an unidentified Jane Doe found near the majestic peaks of Red Rock Canyon in 1994. Discovered by hikers just off a remote trail, she had no identification, no personal effects, and no history. For decades, the case was at a standstill, with investigators unable to match her remains to any missing person reports across the Southwest.
However, the 2026 Forensic Initiative has achieved what was once considered a scientific impossibility. The breakthrough came not from a new witness, but from the objects the victim wore during her final moments. Utilizing a revolutionary technique known as touch DNA, forensic technicians revisited the victim's discarded jewelry, a small, intricate locket and a silver band found at the site in 1994. In the past, the amount of genetic material left behind on such small surfaces was too minute to be sequenced, but with 2026-level amplification technology, the team was able to isolate a microscopic profile of skin cells trapped in the crevices of the jewelry's metal. This profile was more than just a sequence, it was a roadmap. The connection was forged when this genetic data was processed through a 2026 ancestry database. The search did not produce a direct match, but it did identify a high-probability familial cluster. The data pointed toward a specific lineage located thousands of miles away. Investigators traced this hit to a prominent family in the Pacific Northwest, a family that had been searching for a daughter who had left home for the bright lights of Las Vegas in the early 90s and was never heard from again. For the first time in 32 years, the Desert Rose has a name. She was a young woman with a future, a family, and a story that was abruptly ended in the canyon. This identification has allowed the 2026 task force to move from the who to the how, and ultimately to the who else. By reclaiming her identity, they were able to re-examine her final movements in Las Vegas through the lens of her real history. This led them to a startling realization regarding the suspect. As the task force cross-referenced her newly identified social circle with criminal records from the era, a specific pattern emerged. The evidence points directly toward a man whose name is already intimately familiar to the Nevada Department of Corrections. The prime suspect in the case of the Desert Rose is a name already sitting in a Nevada prison, currently serving time for an unrelated crime committed in the late 1990s. The 2026 updates have revealed that this individual was operating in the Red Rock area during the exact window of the victim's disappearance. Furthermore, the specialized task force discovered a series of letters and personal logs within the prisoner's property, seized during a 2025 cell search, that contained geographical references matching the site where the Desert Rose was found. These logs, when paired with the new DNA identification, suggest a level of involvement that the suspect had managed to keep secret for 3 decades. The resolution of the Desert Rose case is a testament to the power of the 2026 Forensic Initiative. It proves that no matter how much time passes, the physical evidence remains a silent witness to the truth. The science of 2026 has given a voice back to a woman who was silenced in 1994, and it has placed the responsibility for her fate at the feet of a man who thought he had outrun the reach of justice. As the investigation moves toward a formal indictment, the Desert Rose is finally being returned to the family in the Pacific Northwest, and the desert is yielding one of its most enduring secrets.
In the world of Las Vegas gaming, there is no greater exile than being placed in the Black Book. Officially known as the List of Excluded Persons, it was designed to keep the most notorious figures of organized crime away from the counting rooms of the Strip. However, in 2026, the 2026 Forensic Initiative uncovered the conspiracy, a revelation that the Black Book was not just a list of those excluded from the casinos, but in some cases, a catalog of those targeted by them. Investigators have begun exploring the link between this list and a string of unsolved hits from the 1990s, suggesting that for some, being banned was merely the first step toward being permanently silenced. This investigation was made possible by the data leak of 2026, a massive anonymous dump of encrypted private security logs from a defunct casino, a property that stood at the epicenter of the 1990s Strip, provided the task force with a digital fossil of the era. These logs, which had been hidden behind layers of obsolete encryption for over 30 years, contain minute-by-minute surveillance data and internal security memos.
By decrypting these files, investigators have been able to construct a precise timeline of the victim's last movements. The logs show that individuals like Dana Mackay and several others on the exclusion list were being tracked with military precision by private security teams long before they vanished. The data reveals that these individuals were being marked by casino surveillance, their license plates scanned, their meetings recorded, and their departures signaled to a secondary group operating outside the hotel's legal jurisdiction. As the 2026 task force analyzed the metadata from these leaks, they successfully identified the existence of the shadow network. This was a clandestine logistical layer that functioned as a bridge between the legitimate front of the casino and the permanent silence of the desert. At the center of this network was a specific individual, the middleman. Using the leaked logs and 2026 financial tracing, the initiative identified this middleman as a former high-ranking security consultant who officially retired in the late 1990s. This individual coordinated the movements between the casinos and the desert burial sites, ensuring that the transition from the bright lights of the lobby to the shadows of the Mojave was seamless. The middleman did not perform the acts himself. He managed the logistics, the vehicles with tinted windows, the communication channels, and the selection of burial sites that would remain undisturbed by the city's rapid expansion. The identification of this shadow network has fundamentally changed the scope of the investigation. It proves that the disappearances of the 1990s were not isolated incidents or random acts of violence. They were managed, professional operations designed to protect the interests of a gaming industry that was still cleaning its house as it moved into the corporate era. The Black Book was the public face of the industry's desire for order, but the private security logs suggest a much more absolute form of exclusion was taking place. The 2026 Forensic Initiative is now using this leaked data to cross-reference every name in the Black Book with the GPS coordinates of anomalies found in the desert. The middleman's network, once thought to be an untraceable ghost in the machine, is now being mapped out with 21st century clarity. The secrets that the defunct casino thought were destroyed with their hard drives are now the primary evidence in a conspiracy case that spans decades. The logic of the 1990s was that if you vanished in Las Vegas, you were simply another person who lost big. But the science and the leaks of 2026 are proving that for many, the game was rigged long before they ever walked through the casino doors. In the pursuit of justice, investigators often hit what is known as the forensic wall, the point where traditional evidence like fingerprints or standard DNA simply cannot bridge the gap left by 30 years of environmental exposure. However, in 2026, the 2026 Forensic Initiative has breached this wall using the science of isotopic analysis. While DNA tells us who a person is, isotopes tell us where they have been. This technology allows scientists to analyze the chemical signatures stored within the human body, providing a geological diary of a person's life. Every time we drink water or eat food, we ingest stable isotopes of elements like strontium, oxygen, and lead. These elements are absorbed into our tissues and, most importantly, are locked permanently into our tooth enamel during childhood. Because the isotopic composition of water and soil varies significantly by geography, the enamel acts as a permanent GPS record of a person's developmental years. In early 2026, the task force applied this technique to several unidentified remains recovered from the Mojave. The results were a revelation for tracing origin. For decades, it was assumed these victims were Las Vegas locals, individuals who had lived and worked in the valley for years, but the isotopic signatures told a different story. By analyzing the oxygen and strontium ratios in the enamel, scientists proved that several victims did not grow up in the arid Southwest. Instead, their chemical profiles matched the unique geological signature of the Appalachian region. This discovery allowed for isotopic mapping, a process where forensic geologists cross-reference biological data with global maps of environmental isotopes. The task force generated heat maps that narrowed the victims' childhood homes to specific counties in West Virginia and Kentucky. This narrowed the search parameters by thousands of miles, allowing investigators to coordinate with East Coast agencies to identify runaways or travelers from the 1980s and 90s whose disappearances were never reported in Nevada. However, as the science advances, it runs headlong into the dilemma. Las Vegas is a city that thrives on reinvention. It is a place that habitually implodes its past to build a more shimmering future. This creates a monumental challenge for investigators: the difficulty of verifying 30-year-old alibis in a city that renovates its physical and social history every decade. When the 2026 task force identifies a suspect or a witness, they often find that the scene of the crime is now a luxury mall, and the employee records of the defunct casinos where these individuals worked have been lost to successive corporate mergers. The isotopic record can prove where a victim came from, but it cannot easily reconstruct the transient social networks of a city that was designed to let people disappear. The forensic wall is being dismantled by the power of chemistry, but the Vegas factor, that inherent ephemeral nature of the city, remains the final obstacle. As we move closer to the truth, the task force is racing against time, trying to pin down the movements of people who lived in a city that refuses to stand still. The tooth enamel provides the map, but the city's constant evolution makes the ground beneath that map feel increasingly uncertain.
In the early 2000s, while the world was focused on a new millennium, a quiet stretch of roads southwest of the city became the site of a profound legal mystery. The incident occurred on a Tuesday evening in 2002, a sudden ambush on Blue Diamond Road that left investigators with plenty of physical evidence but no clear path to a suspect. At the time, the area was much more isolated than it is today, a dark corridor between the burgeoning suburbs and the open desert. The lack of witnesses and the absence of a clear motive caused the case to stall, eventually becoming one of the most discussed cold files in the department's archive. For over 2 decades, the Blue Diamond file remained dormant. However, in early 2026, the silence was broken by the emergence of a new witness. Through a complex 2026 witness protection agreement involving an unrelated racketeering case, a former transport driver came forward with information that had been withheld for 24 years. This individual provided a detailed account of the night in question, describing a specific vehicle, a high-end sedan with distinctive modifications, that was observed idling near the site of the ambush. This testimony provided the first human link between the location and a specific organized group, giving the task force a fresh starting point for their investigation. This human intelligence was immediately paired with the primary strength of the 2026 forensic initiative: ballistic matching. During the original 2002 investigation, several spent casings were recovered from the desert floor. While the striations on those bullets were recorded, the technology of the era could not find a match within the national databases. In 2026, however, the task force utilized an advanced AI-driven ballistic platform. This system is capable of analyzing microscopic tool marks and firing pin impressions with a level of detail that exceeds human observation. The breakthrough occurred when the AI cross-referenced the 2002 evidence with a weapon seized during a high-profile 2025 raid on a local distribution hub. The software identified a nearly perfect match. The weapon used in the 2002 Blue Diamond ambush had remained in circulation, eventually finding its way into a 2025 evidence locker. This discovery provided a physical bridge across 23 years of history, linking a contemporary criminal organization to a cold case from the turn of the century. To solidify this link, the initiative utilized forensic ballistics to reconstruct the exact dynamics of the 2002 event. By combining the witness's description of the vehicle's position with the AI-matched ballistic data, investigators created a digital recreation of the ambush. This simulation confirmed the trajectory of the rounds and matched the specific mechanical signature of the recovered weapon. The 2026 updates have transformed the Blue Diamond case from a series of disconnected facts into a coherent narrative with a verifiable physical origin. The re-evaluation of this case proves that the passage of time does not always lead to the degradation of evidence. Sometimes, time allows for the development of the very tools needed to understand that evidence. The 2002 ambush, once a symbol of the limitations of the legal system, has become a showcase for the persistence of 2026 technology. The weapon, the witness, and the AI have converged to provide an answer that was nearly a quarter-century in the making.
For every cold case file reopened by the 2026 Forensic Initiative, there is a living room where time has stood still for decades. While the science of isotopes and AI-driven ballistics provides the technical how, it is the voices of the families that provide the why for this massive undertaking. In 2026, we have had the privilege of witnessing profound moments of closure. We have interviewed the children and grandchildren of the victims, people who were toddlers when their parents vanished and are now parents or grandparents themselves. For the daughter of Mary Huffman, who was only 4 years old in 1994, the 2026 updates represent the end of a lifelong ambiguity. She speaks of the hollow space that defined her childhood, the birthdays and graduations marked by a parent's absence, and the heavy weight of not knowing. Now, with the 2026 identification of remains and the recovery of personal effects, that hollow space is being filled with facts. These families are finally receiving answers that allow them to move from a state of perpetual searching to a state of mourning and ultimately peace. The recovery of a simple locket or a weathered ring from the Mojave Sands has become a sacred event, returning a piece of a lost history to those who have waited 30 years for a phone call. This ripple effect extends beyond individual homes and into the heart of the city itself, fostering a sense of community healing. For a long time, the public's perception of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department was shaped by the sheer volume of its unsolved mysteries. There was a sense that in a city of transients, the lost were easily forgotten. However, the success of the 2026 Forensic Initiative is fundamentally changing that reputation. By demonstrating a commitment to solving cases that are older than many of its active officers, the department is signaling that no life in Las Vegas is considered a lost cause. The resolution of cases like the Blue Diamond ambush and the Desert Rose identification has restored a level of community trust that was once thought to be permanently eroded. Residents are seeing that the passage of time does not equate to a lack of interest. The city is beginning to shed its image as a place where secrets are buried forever, replacing it with a reputation for scientific rigor and an unwavering pursuit of justice. However, this progress brings us face to face with a difficult legal reality: the justice gap. As the 2026 task force identifies suspects through advanced genealogy and ballistic matching, they are often finding that the individuals responsible for these 1990s and 1980s crimes are now in their late 80s or 90s. This creates a significant challenge for the judicial system. How do you balance the need for absolute accountability with the practicalities of a defendant's failing health or memory? Prosecutors in 2026 are navigating uncharted territory. In some instances, the goal has shifted from lengthy prison sentences to achieving a formal public admission of guilt before the suspect passes away. The justice gap reminds us that while science can move at the speed of light, human life is finite. There is a sense of urgency within the 2026 Forensic Initiative to secure these resolutions while the witnesses and perpetrators are still able to stand in a courtroom. The social impact of these cases is a complex tapestry of relief, sorrow, and administrative hurdles. We are seeing a city confront its past with a level of honesty that was previously avoided. For the grandchildren of the vanished, 2026 is the year they finally learned the names and the stories of the people they come from. For the city of Las Vegas, it is a year of reclamation, reclaiming the lives that were hidden in the desert and proving that in the modern era, the truth has a way of outlasting the silence. As we conclude this exploration of the 7 shocking updates that have redefined the history of Las Vegas in 2026, we are forced to confront the lesson of these investigations. For decades, the consensus was that the desert was a place of permanent silence, that once a story was buried in the sand or submerged in the lake, it was lost to the march of progress. We have learned, however, that while time can bury the physical truth, science possesses an incredible capacity to exhume it. The 2026 Forensic Initiative has demonstrated that cold is merely a temporary state. With the advent of genetic genealogy, isotopic mapping, and AI-driven ballistic analysis, the barriers that once protected the secrets of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s have been systematically dismantled. This journey proves that the truth is resilient. It persists in the structure of a tooth, the microscopic grooves of a lead casing, and the digital echoes of a defunct server. The lesson for the future is clear. There is no longer a place far enough or a vault deep enough to hide the reality of what has transpired. Yet, even as we celebrate these resolutions, we must arrive at an honest acknowledgement of the why. Through the work of the task force, we have successfully solved the how. We have mapped the trajectories, identified the remains, and connected the weapons to the perpetrators. But the internal motivations, the specific social and professional pressures of a bygone era of Las Vegas remain a mystery that science cannot fully quantify. We can identify the middleman who managed the logistics of a 1993 disappearance, and we can link a lounge singer's fate to a hotel foundation, but we cannot fully inhabit the minds of those who made those decisions in a city that was transitioning from a syndicate-run town to a corporate destination. The why is locked in a cultural context that is rapidly fading. We are left with the evidence of their actions, a ledger of deeds that the 2026 updates have finally brought into the light. The technical resolution provides justice, but the human motivation remains a ghost in the machine of history. As the sun sets over the Mojave, we see a city that is no longer defined by what it hides, but by its willingness to look back. The neon dreams of the future are being built on a foundation of transparency, ensuring that the stories of the lost are never again considered the price of doing business. The truth has been exhumed, the names have been spoken, and the desert is finally at rest. The search for the truth never truly ends, and your perspective is a vital part of this ongoing conversation. Every detail we uncover brings us one step closer to a complete picture of our shared history. CTA. If you found these 2026 updates as transformative as we did, please subscribe to Cold Case Frontiers. We are committed to bringing you the most advanced forensic breakthroughs and the untold stories of the cases that were once thought to be lost to time. Comment below. We want to hear from you. Which of these 7 updates shocked you the most? Was it the recovery of the neon ghost from beneath the hotel foundation, or the identification of the desert rose through touch DNA? And more importantly, as we look at the justice gap and the aging suspects of these decades-old crimes, is it ever too late for justice? Does a resolution in 2026 provide the same weight as one in 1993, or is the act of naming the truth enough? Thank you for watching, for caring about the stories of the vanished, and for supporting the pursuit of scientific justice. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and your mind open to the truth.